Our topic today is called Coming Out of the Cave. I put cave in quotation marks. I'll go and explain on that a little bit in detail going forward, and the solutions to address this feeling of returning not just to work but to life. And I'll be going into some depth of understanding and sharing our understanding of what it is to return back to the life that we once knew circa 2019. Speaking of which, once upon a time, for those who can go back 20 months or so, you can remember how life was. And I just wanted to remind us that life was normal, which is what we count on. We're safe in a normal environment. Predictable is important too, because we don't really like surprises. When this COVID hit us as hard as it did and changed the way we interacted in our society, how we lost our direct contact with our friends, we had to isolate, we stayed in bubbles, we learned words like lockdown and shutdown and stages and color coding for areas. I think you remember it was a very different world, and we've missed all that. We went around our lives engaging in all aspects of our community. It allowed us to enjoy the world that we have, something for many of us we're now just starting to realize that it's possible to have again. We thought nothing about being in crowds or in crowded places. And of course, with a virus that was in our community and still remains in our community, there is a lot of concern and anxiety. And I think it's normal to think that we still have to be cautious. We're still not out of it. We are better than we were, but we still have to be very prudent in the way that we interact in crowds. And as I mentioned, March of 2020, COVID changed and changed everything in our lives. And for many of us, it didn't change things particularly well. Again, if you're a social person, you wanted to be with your friends, you wanted to go out and eat in restaurants, you wanted to go to movies, you wanted to go to see your favorite sports team. Although I think we can say that some of these enterprises of going out and seeing hockey again, and here in London, the London Knights will be playing to 100% capacity again, and it's on the news today that restaurants and pubs and gyms will probably be resuming back to 100% capacity. But just a thought that we're all coming back together in 100% capacity is still a very daunting thing. We soon learned that our families, our friends, and everyone were facing this lethal virus. 28,000 Canadians, 1.7 million Canadians have come down with or been diagnosed with COVID, but that's just the people who actually went and got tested. So I think the number is probably larger. We recognize that the challenges of the past year, our schools closed and the hardship that put on families. Only businesses that deemed essential could open, and thank goodness for that, because those essential businesses have kept our society going. And we had to look after and protect the elderly. And I think it's questionable how well we've done with that, but we're doing what we can today and for the future to look into that issue. We had a new definition for heroes. We realized the people who made the sacrifices to ensure that we, again, could have a normal life. We learned about those words again, the bubbles, the lockdowns, the color-coded areas, and how that's affected our lives and what they mean. I don't like the word lockdown. Lockdown sounds awfully punitive. I wish they had chosen a different word. But nevertheless, there it is. These are words that we would like to see ended and to get back to that regular life. So let me just say this. The message was and has been and continues to be, as much as possible, stay home, stay with your family, stay safe, act safely, stay distance from people, protect yourself and those you love. And when you hear this message over and over and over from various levels of health departments, health units, and from our own government officials, it creates in our society a sense of immediacy for concern. And now the message is changing, and businesses are reopening and companies are inviting their employees back. And some of us may not be very comfortable with the prospect of having to do that, especially if you're not sure exactly how things will roll forward in your new business world. Life in the cave. Well, I want to now explain where the word cave comes from in the title. But Jim, with COVID, never thought about going outside and shopping and riding the bus. All those types of things. With COVID, it seems scarier and more frightening. Even today, going grocery shopping, finding yourself in a mall that might be filled with people, masked or unmasked. It's a scary world out there, and we're starting to realize that the world is again evolving to a better place, but it's still on this journey to get there. That over last summer, or I kept hearing the words cave syndrome. Basically, it's a phrase to describe people who may not be so willing to resume their normal life because of all the challenges and fears and worries that this pandemic has placed in us. Because again, we've retreated to the cave. We've retreated to our homes and did what we can and continue to do what we can to stay safe. So in that sense, we've been told to shelter in place, isolate, retreat. A daily and consistent message has forced us to head into our caves. So, I'm doing this webinar from my cave, which is a small office in my business here in London. Normally, I would be out and doing webinar or workshops and seminars and presentations in front of hundreds of people every week. It doesn't happen. I'm still sort of having to be in this mode. So I'm speaking to you today from my cave, as it were. With the reopening, the message is it's now safe or safer, and it's time to leave the cave. But for some of us, we have hesitation. And I say it's justifiable hesitation because we're still getting reports of COVID in our communities. Even though we're down to, say, 300, 400, 500 cases a day, keeping in mind that's the 300, 400, 500 cases a day that we know of based on testing. There's all the other cases that we don't know of because no one's getting tested and may be asymptomatic and so on. So, we're justified. It's justifiable anxiety that, okay, we go back to work, we can go back to our lives. But this journey back is going to be harder than the journey from it in the original pace. It's important to note that for many reasons, there's a lot of folks that may have some hesitations about re-entering the world. Well, after a year and a half of being under this threat of a daily virus or a deadly virus. And for some of us, re-engaging with our lives has been easier. I have friends that they've confidently returned to the world which we knew of. I have others that have some hesitations and doubts and are very worried and are still worried about bringing possible COVID back to their elderly parents and so on and so forth. So in between those who are happy to return and get on with life to those who have justifiable concerns, we need to be respectful for those who still want to be cautious, who are risk averse, as it were. And finally, for some, the return to work and the social nature of being it's been welcomed. The idea of being able to be back with your friends, back at work, seeing old familiar faces again, integrating in a social atmosphere. For others, working remotely has had its concerns, and maybe working from home has, for some people, actually been a respite. And I'll talk about that next. This is where I say the home has always been more than a shelter to us. It's always been a place of comfort, it's a place of safety, it's a place where we feel our best and our most relaxed in the course of our lives. But as we've gone through this COVID and it's pushed us maybe away from work or away from our clients and customers and all those good things that we had before, we've had some what I call unexpected benefits. More time with your family, which for some people, that's been a real treat, to have more time with their children or to have more time directly with the family in their life around them. Time saved, commuting to work. If you're working from home, I've been working from home for 3 decades now. But if I was driving to work, I don't think I'd miss that 20, 30, 40-minute drive one way or back, or the traffic or what have you. So some people have saved gas money and some people have saved time because they have been able to work from home, if that's been something they've enjoyed doing. Of course, they save money, there's reduced costs, you may feel more productive. There's all kinds of studies from large companies across the United States that are rethinking about asking their employees to return to an office environment because they have now determined that the people working from home were actually more productive working from home than actually working in their departments or working with their colleagues. So there's some interesting, analysis on what productivity looks like. There can be less distractions or interruptions, but it all depends if you've got children at home who are also learning from distance education. Remember when the kids were away from school and learning from home, that might have been a distraction. But if you're working from home today and the kids are back at school, well, there are obviously less interruptions and distractions. And the last piece, and really I think it's a topic for another webinar, and I'm doing webinars on this very piece, is freedom from difficult or toxic people. Probably the biggest benefit about not necessarily working in a work environment with people around you and working remotely or in an isolated way from, say, from home as an example, again, is that you may be distanced away from some of those difficult colleagues and toxic environments, and maybe even a difficult or toxic boss now. So there's that. So some people have found it to be, again, I'm not in that environment, but now I'm being asked maybe to return to that, and that can be a bit scary. Perhaps more than ever, we've come to appreciate the true value of how our homes have made us feel safe from the outside world. So let's move on and talk about stress and anxiety and you on this journey. I have to admit, too, as a business owner, it's been very stressful. I have some issues wondering about my business and where it's going to go over the next 6 or 10 or 12 months. Basically, my business being a business of people. I'm the people business. I do my work in front of people. I speak to people. I speak at conferences. I do seminars and workshops. It's all required for me to actually be in the same room with people. I've been unable to do that. And of course, I'm concerned. I have justifiable concerns about where my business might go. I'm hoping to resume to normal, as all of us do, but there it is. There's been survey after survey after survey. I won't bore you with this, but according to CAMH from this summer, that more Canadians, about half of Canadians are reporting issues around mental health issues, including stress and anxiety. And of course, you're going, well, no kidding. We've been under so much stress and strain, and the world hasn't been the world that we've come to know and love for quite a while now. With all that uncertainty and anxiety and financial pressures, it can be challenging. And it's even more challenging if you run a small business and you have all those pressures on you to try to do what you can to pivot or adapt your business and keep it going in some way, shape, or form. Running a restaurant, I know a lot of restaurant people have been extremely stressed because, they need to have an 85 or 95% capacity of people in their restaurants to make money. The profit margins in restaurants and bars and those types of things are thin, and they need people. So if you're running a small business, you probably have a justifiable amount of anxiety and a sense of relief that you hope will come when we see our businesses sort of resume. So there's that. I find that small business owners and entrepreneurs have especially hard time admitting they can't handle stress because they want to be strong for themselves. They want to be strong for their employees. If they've got employees, they want to look like they're in control, but they don't often want to admit that this is a difficult journey. There's a saying, and I think it's true, that if you don't change the way you're managing stress and anxiety, that the problem is only going to get worse. So again, let's look at what anxiety is and how to manage that. Anxiety, very briefly explained, because it's a complex thing. What makes one person anxious may not make the next person anxious. Here's an example. Some people are anxious about traveling, especially through airports and onto passenger planes and the whole experience of doing that to go somewhere. Others are quite comfortable and very relaxed and have no issues with it. So again, what can make one person anxious may not necessarily make the second person anxious. When faced with significant or psychological stress, such as what we've been through, our body reacts with something called a fight or flight response. Two very interesting things. The fight response is when we're stressed, we feel a need to take action. We need to do something. We get active. It's the adrenaline gland kicking in, and we literally want to get up and get going. And the flight response is where the cave syndrome is about. We retreat. We feel it's safer to step back into a safe zone. Now, just a little bit more on anxiety, and I don't want to sound like a scientist here, but it's important to understand what it does to us. The response prepares your body for physical action. In other words, when we're going through anxiety and stress, our whole body is basically affected, including our circulatory, pulmonary, immune, and nervous systems. In other words, when you're anxious, you know it, you feel it. It's different than when you're relaxed. Anxious is, you have something very significant in your life that's about to happen. Anxious is that you've got maybe to go into the hospital for surgery. Anxious is you've got a big family event coming up, and there's a lot of planning, and you're worried about things going right or wrong. You can actually feel anxiety. You can feel its effects inside you. The physical symptoms with anxiety included things like your breathing changes or becomes what I call shallow breathing, stomach issues, muscle tensions, and you can actually document when you're anxious because your blood pressure or even your pulse rate can accelerate. The psychological symptoms included things like, again, the feelings of worry, and you're conscious of the world and conscious of yourself in it, and again, anxiety. So the psychological side is something that if you're here today, you're very aware of. Now, here are some solutions to mitigate anxiety as you return to work and re-engage with life again. Now, I'm just going to stop here for a moment and say that I want to get back to my life again. But it's going to be something for me to go to a conference and mingle in a conference setting and to speak to several hundred people and be in a room full of people and share elevators and to have all that experience of being around lots of people again, and to be doing it mask free at some point. So, when we look going forward, we have to realize that anxiousness is our body's way of saying, be safe, be cautious, be risk averse. All right, so there are 3 parts I wanted to share with you in this part. The first is, before you go back to work, some things you need to do and think about on returning to work, part 2, and part 3 is better ways to manage anxiety. So on this journey to returning back to work, I'm going to assume that either you're in the process of doing that, or your employer is starting to talk about this, or things are changing at work that they feel that they can open up a bit more, or they're asking you to go part days and maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever the arrangement is. So here's some really good advice. Here's the advice I'd give you if you're in this process of returning back to work. The first is to have a conversation with your employer and look at what are your options. Again, with employers looking at the best possible modeling for a changed business plan, perhaps. Some businesses want to get back to the way they were, exactly to the way they were, but others are exploring hybrid models of how business works, where you may work from home, you may work away from home. You may work with your team on certain days. You may stay grouped on a certain floor in a certain area just for safety's sake. But are you working part-time from home, being able to temporarily work from different locations, or being relocated maybe even to a different part of the business or the part of the company, just even temporarily until we feel even more that this COVID crisis is over. Determine what steps your employer is willing to take to ensure the safest possible environment. If you're feeling anxious about going to work, it's incumbent in you to find out, what is your company doing? What's your business that you're returning to? What are they doing to ensure the safety of all their employees? What are the safety protocols? Our health departments and health units are working very diligently with employers to ensure the safest possible return to work environment, and they have an obligation to follow those protocols. Where you have to wear a mask, where you have to wear a mask at your desk, where you have to wear a mask when you're walking in and out of your business. When you arrive at the business, will you have to sign in? Will there be tracing and tracking and all this? So find out what. The more you know about what to expect on the return to work, the less anxious you're likely to be. And finally, take some comfort in knowing, again, that the employer is legally required to provide a safe workplace. They did that before there was COVID, and now, as we're going through and working through COVID, they're still even more so focused on the health of employees and to ensure that, that everyone returning into the work environment as they now define it will be following the protocols, and they're responsible for that. All right, so there's a few pieces about that. What to do before you go back to work. I think to reduce anxiety, it's on you to do your homework, make some phone calls, maybe check your employer's website if they've got one, and to find out what transparency exists between how they want you to prepare for that journey back. And it's just like when your children return back to school. The school board was clear about what they expect children to do, how they were going to be educated in the room, how the room would be set up, what the teacher would be doing, and all those types of things. We learned all about that before the children returned back in September. Part 2, on the day of returning back to work. I'm going to assume maybe you have already done this or you're about to do this, but with your coworkers, let them know that you're anxious. You may find that others feel the same way. Now, I'm going to tell you that when you're in an anxious situation and others are anxious and you feel that we're all sort of feeling anxious together, ironically, it makes us less anxious to know that we're not the only one feeling this way. So again, if you remain anxious about returning, let your coworkers know. It may also trigger all of you to be just a little extra safe in your own area, your own department as you're working through, and that you appreciate those efforts to make safety a priority. So, mask wearing, using hand cleaner, or making sure that desks remain physically distant, so there's no one looking over your shoulder and breathing over your shoulder. Little things like that can make a big difference. Ensure your immediate supervisor or manager knows your safety concerns. So again, a conversation with your higher up, the person you report to. And my guess is at the same time, they will do what they can to ensure or reinforce in you that, what they are doing as a leader, what they're doing as a company to ensure everyone's safety. Be prepared to express your concerns. If you see something that makes you a little bit anxious, I think you should feel empowered to say something. If you see something, say something. And I think it's the same if you work in a place and you go, I think maybe we were slipping a little bit, because I think we can generally say that as the more comfortable we get, maybe the more relaxed will become around safety protocols. And until it's, we're deemed to be safe enough to say goodbye to them, we still have to be diligent. So remember to express yourself to your higher up, your boss, your coworkers. If you see something, say something. Just say, can we work at staying safe as a priority as we return to work? Remember, doing something and taking action helps you have control over your environment and your anxiety. And that's the biggest part about anxiety, is if you feel powerless through this, you will feel anxious. But if you feel you can have some ownership over your actions and have some say around your world, you will feel less anxious. Finally, part 3, ways to better manage anxiety. Some of these little tips I'm about to share with you would be related to dealing with anxiety at home, with friends, family, whatever anxieties you have. They're more generalized in nature, but they still work if you're finding yourself returning back to your life. Again, anxious feelings are normal. I've seen and read a lot about what psychologists have been talking about in this whole, anxious environment and stress-filled environment, and telling people and reinforcing, as I am reinforcing today with you, that the way we feel is unique. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, this pandemic. So the way you feel today is unlike any other feelings that you've had. So it's okay. It's okay not to feel okay all the time. But if you can, realize that you can mitigate your anxiety, take action, and regain control of your life, you'll be in a better place. Now, one step at a time. I've been reading a bit about this. If you want to sort of work your way through an anxious situation, you don't have to sort of tackle the mountain all at once. You can do it a few steps at a time, just like crossing a river. As COVID ends, it'll become safer. We're going to see the world be a little bit more inclined to be what we were used to. So we can do this by taking steps. And here's an example. You can build confidence in yourself, reduce your anxiety by taking bigger and bigger steps. For instance, if anxiety really is something in your life, start by just going for walks with friends. Then start gathering. Second step might be to gather with some small groups of friends that you feel safe with. The third step might be to go to a small party or a gathering. The fourth step might mean I'm going to push myself and be in a larger gathering of people and see how I feel with that. And if I can do well with that, maybe my next step would be to go to a show or the movies or something. As you can see, we're climbing the ladder one rung at a time. We're allowing ourselves to gradually get into situations that will stretch us and maybe help alleviate our fears. Gradually, you work your way back into your lives, and you may find that confidence to go on with your life, and to return to work, and to return to the world that we all knew and love. Here's an example. I see this sometimes when you watch people at the lake. No one, very rarely, just runs right in. They usually go down to the shoreline, and they dip a toe in, and then they walk along, and they get used to how the water temperature is, and then maybe they sort of slowly walk in, and then check the bottom of the lake. Is it safe to walk on, and so on and so forth. But the idea is, before you learn to swim, before you learn to run, you learn to crawl, you learn to walk. This incremental taking steps a few at a time helps us build our confidence. So before we swim, we often find the confidence of standing by the shore, assessing, and then wading in. The most important thing I realized about anxiety is that not doing something actually can make us feel anxious. Like worrying, sitting and worrying about something can make us feel more anxious, as opposed to, I'm going to do something, keep myself busy, put my mind somewhere else. So doing something makes us, again, feel that we're in control of our situation. Anything, even small baby steps towards resuming your life, are important steps and will help you feel better along the way. Here's some tips on how to deal with anxiety. Stick to or create a daily routine. Starting your day at the same time every day, making sure that you go to bed at the same time, ensuring you get enough rest so you're not battling your fatigue, and maintaining a healthy diet, your 3 square meals a day sort of thing. Another way you can deal with stress or anxiety is movement. It's just get out and go for a walk, go and play golf, go play with your children, go rake some leaves, which I'm going to do in about 20 minutes time here. Physical activity can relieve stress, provide a mental reprieve, and can aid in reducing your feelings of anxiety. In other words, you want to feel less anxious? Do something for your mind or your body, because both is going to help you focus on anything else but your anxieties. Focus or embrace on your hobbies and interests. If there's things that you like to do, do them and keep doing them, because they'll make you feel engaged with your life. That sense of engagement with your life and the pleasures of having a hobby or an interest will make you feel better about life in general. Take a temporary break from anxiety in the pages of a good book. Well, over the last 20 months, I've read more books in the last 20 months than I probably have in the last 20 years. I've had a lot of time, but I find that reading books, especially good fiction, can take me to a place that isn't where I am today. A place that I would recommend if you feel anxious about seeing people wearing masks and seeing the news. Dive into a book that's about a time from another time before all this, and lose yourself in a world where there wasn't all the COVID. Here's an interesting, did you know that book sales are at an 8-year high? So in 2020, books which were on a decline have come back in a big way. People want to hold something in their hand and again, I think, escape the world of where we are in the moment to enjoy something from before all this happened. And it might be the same with your video watching, your streaming experiences, your television experiences. We want to sometimes put our world where we're inhabiting, not where it is right now. In other words, we're tired of seeing the news and all the bad news. It's nice to be able to have a break from it. Fight anxiety with enlightenment. Here's my tip of the day after this webinar is over and you've looked over the handout one more time. Start to research anxiety. There's all kinds of information on the internet. You only have to, Google managing anxiety or something like that, and you'll get access to countless articles and countless websites and helpful tips and things beyond what I've even suggested. But the deal with anxiety is knowledge, and knowledge is power, and power will power you through anxiety. I don't know how you feel about music. Me personally, I'm much more relaxed when I have music on in the office. It might be the time when you go back to work, you may like to have certain music on. You may listen to music while you're working. Music has a way of soothing us, and the other side of it, it just puts us in a better frame of mind. And it can help, again, maybe keep the anxiety levels down while you're back at work. Get busy and focus on productive anxieties or activities. Anxiety loves to have a place to reside, and doing nothing is where it will reside best. So keeping yourself busy, giving yourself a task, giving yourself a chore, giving yourself a goal or an ambition to do something. That I don't mind admitting that I'll be out raking leaves, and raking leaves helps put my mind in a better place. So I'll do that. I'll feel I've accomplished something and rake some leaves, but that's me. But find opportunities and tasks in which you can get a positive feeling of accomplishment. It may not necessarily be something you're going to do right now, but at some point, volunteering can really help you feel better about the world that you're in. I've often recommended to people that if you are having some difficulties, go out and help someone else and make some difference in your community. So if you volunteer, that might be helping a little bit on the anxiety front. Melt anxiety by talking it out. Last thing I want to mention, or one of the last things I want to mention, is having a conversation with someone you really trust, someone that you like, someone who is a good listener, someone who's not going to try to talk you out of it, but maybe someone who's able to sort of relate to your anxieties. You can often get a great deal of comfort just talking about anxiety and how it's making you feel. And the more you're able to talk it out with friends and family, and they can talk with you, then I think that shared experience of anxiety becomes mitigated, because we're all sort of on the same great boat together in this. Also, you can get some relief by writing out how you feel about your anxieties and then tearing it all up afterwards, not keeping it around, but actually the good feelings of being able to tear it all up as a symbol of overcoming, or at least not letting it stick with you. Get connected. This is a great time. Obviously, over the last 20 months, we've counted on our social media to stay in touch with friends and family from a distance, and to share videos and to see their lives, and using FaceTime or Zoom like we're doing today to have those one-on-one face-to-face conversations with others. It's important to have good social connections. I use the phrase positive and enriching experiences, because I think that not all social media has that. So look for that as helping you going forward. If anxiety really is an issue for you, you may need to have a talk with either your doctor or a religious leader if you are a religious nature. Again, if the talking through, you may get some good advice from your doctor on what you might do to sort of mitigate feelings of anxiety. If you have a religious leader, the spiritual guidance and what you might be able to find in spiritual nature of how to deal with this. Don't worry in the bedroom. Don't let anxiety conquer you there. If you are anxious, the worst place you can do it is you're lying on your back in the middle of the night thinking about what's happening in your life. If you are worrying in the bedroom, get up and go somewhere else and sit in the house until you're ready to go back to sleep. But don't let worrying and anxiety become a habit in bed. And finally, be observant of others. What gives me comfort is I'm seeing the world reopen on television. I'm seeing the world reopen in my community. And while this is all going on and all this is happening, I'm feeling better as a person about our prospects. And I'm just starting to feel more hopeful going forward. And that helps make me sort of cope with the way I'm feeling. If it was getting worse, I'd feel worse. If our COVID numbers were skyrocketing, I'd feel terrible too. But because we seem to be getting things under control, And again, we were reopening businesses, reopening schools, reopening sports arenas and sporting events. And then again, on the weekend, we may be back at our favorite restaurant or bar or pub. Should that be the thing that you want to do, you may see that more people coming back together. Even watching the kids go back to school in September was a sense of, yeah, okay, we're getting back to normal again. I feel better that I see the kids finally going back to school. That just tells me, from my perspective, that we're one step closer to the world that we want to get back to. So here's a quick recap for us today. It's totally normal and acceptable to feel anxious, and have these feelings as we return to our lives. So if you're thinking, oh, yeah, I feel bad about feeling anxious, don't feel bad. I think that more Canadians feel anxious than less Canadians, although the level of anxiety is slowly going down as we return back to normal. Secondly, to mitigate anxiety, try to figure out or try to understand how it makes you feel and how it affects you, and embrace these strategies I've shared with you, and to do some homework on it. If you want to attack an anxiety or what makes you feel anxiety, knowledge is power. It helps you understand what it does and how you may have some control over it. A return to work might mean communicating, and will mean communicating with your employer, and to understand what they're doing to keep you and your colleagues safe. And they're also eligible or obligated to keep the safe possible workplace environment. So I think you can feel reasonably safe that they will want to do what they can. There's not an employer anywhere who wants to have an outbreak. So they're doing what they can to keep us safe. And I think the evidence is in that when you visit other businesses and you see what they're doing to keep their employees safe. Develop a plan of action before and after you return to work. So again, those conversations you have, preparing for the day that you go, talking to your colleagues, ensuring there's a safe environment around you, having them to work with you on that, all those types of things are important. And make it your personal mission to understand that all you can understand about anxiety, again, this is a very complex thing. And like I say, some people are less anxious, some are still anxious, and some won't be anxious until there's virtually nothing left in the world of COVID for us to be anxious about. But there you have it. So I hope it's been helpful for you today. I'm going to, at this point, thank you all very much for attending today. I hope you found it interesting, and I would encourage you to take hope, take faith that we're on the right track. I feel more inclined to think we're going to get there sooner. I think we still have a winter to get through, if you want my opinion, but we will get through there. If you want a copy of the presentation or any of my handouts, just go to my website and you will find that there is a handout section there. And just click on handout 17. And it's just so easy to click and save the file or print it out should you want, but you'll find it there.